So, did you hear about Adani Commodities selling off a chunk of their shares in Adani Wilmar? It's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, I did actually. It's an offer for sale or OFS where they're selling shares through the stock exchange. They initially planned to sell a pretty big chunk, about 13.5%. But well, it's more now.
More? How much more? I mean, 13.5% already sounds like a lot.
Exactly. Well, they had an oversubscription option, which they've decided to use partially. So instead of just the initial 175 million shares, they're now selling about 195 million shares, which is roughly 15.01% of the total company.
Okay, wow, that's a significant increase. So they initially planned to sell 13.5%, but now it's 15%. It's like they weren't sure at first and then said, let's do more.
Yeah, it seems like it. Initially, they were planning to sell 175 million shares with an option to sell another 84 million, but they didn't go for the full oversubscription. They added just about 20 million more.
Okay, so it's not the full 6.5% oversubscription they could have done, just a smaller portion. Got it. This is a bit confusing. So, how does this whole offer thing work again?
Well, it's an offer for sale. So basically, Adani Commodities, which is one of the promoters, is selling some of their shares. It's done through a separate window on the Bombay Stock Exchange and the National Stock Exchange, like a separate lane for these trades.
A separate lane for shares. I like that analogy. So it's not just regular trading on the market, but something specific for this sale.
Precisely. The way they structure it, there are different days for different kinds of investors. The first day, T day, is for non-retail investors, meaning big institutions and such.
Okay, so the big players get the first crack at it. That makes sense, I guess.
Exactly. And then on T+1 day, which is the next trading day, retail investors and any non-retail investors who didn't get their full orders on the first day can participate.
So if the big institutions don't buy enough, the regular folks get a shot, kind of like leftovers, maybe.
Well, yeah, it's a way to ensure that smaller investors have a chance and also allows institutions to carry over their bids.
I get it. Makes sense. Now, was there anything in the document about why they are doing this sale?
Well, the document itself doesn't explicitly state the reasons. Often these sales are done to comply with regulatory requirements or to raise capital for other ventures.
So it's not necessarily a bad sign that they're selling shares. It could be for several reasons.
Exactly. And it's important to note that these shares aren't being registered under US securities laws. So they can't just be offered to anyone in the United States.
Oh, interesting. So there are restrictions based on location. It's like saying these shares are for you, but not for you in the US, kind of thing.
Kind of like that, yes. They're sold to specific institutional buyers in the US and to others outside the US according to those specific country laws, which keeps it compliant.
Right, compliance, got it. So it's a pretty controlled process, not just a free for all. This whole thing is like a carefully planned operation, huh?
Absolutely. The sale is specifically following guidelines for these kind of offers, and even the terminology used is defined in the notice, which is pretty standard.
Okay, so just to recap, Adani Commodities is selling a significant chunk of their shares in Adani Wilmar, about 15.01%, through a stock exchange mechanism.
That's right. The initial plan was 13.5%, but they've decided to partially use their oversubscription option for that extra 1.51%, which is actually around 20 million shares.
Right, and they have different days for different investors. So the big guys first, then the rest of us, got it?
Exactly. And it's not available everywhere, especially with these US laws, and the sale is done in specific trading windows.
And no clear reasons for the sale mentioned. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, this is a lot more involved than just someone selling stocks on their own, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a structured process to ensure it's fair and compliant. It's like conducting a controlled auction, I guess.
A controlled auction. That's a good analogy. Now, what's the significance of all of this for the market, do you think?
Well, it could affect Adani Wilmar's share price. Any large share sale can lead to fluctuations, but it really depends on investor sentiment, I guess.
Okay, so it might cause a bit of a stir, but we'll have to see how the market reacts, right? I mean, it's all interconnected.
Exactly. And it's also an indication of how promoters are managing their stakes in the company.
That's true. It does raise a few questions, though, about their future plans. I mean, what happens next?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This sale might allow them to raise capital or maybe restructure their holdings. It could be anything, really.
So it's a bit of a wait-and-see situation then. A significant development for Adani Wilmar, but we'll have to see how it plays out, right?
Exactly. It's a big move, but the market's reaction will really tell the story, you know. It's like watching a complex play unfold. We know the first act, but not the rest.
Right. A play with an uncertain ending. Well, that's a good way to put it. Let's see what happens next.
Definitely, let's keep an eye on this and see how it all unfolds. It should be interesting.